It's going to be another busy afternoon with a packed agenda of speakers. Governor Doug Burgum is set to take the stage and make his debut later this evening. Former President Trump entered the arena much like last night to an enthusiastic crowd. His pick for Vice President, Senator J.D. Vance, joined him in the VIP box. Senator J.D. Vance was chosen for Vice President today. I'm joined now by Senator Kevin Cramer. Senator Cramer, thank you for joining me today.
My honor. I think you're talking to me.
We have not heard any official word yet from the Mandan Police Department, but again, they say that information will come later. The Homeland Security Director says if AM radio were to completely shut off like this, it would affect how his department gets the important information out to listeners. When customers come to the tavern, this is what they're greeted with. You can see it reads right here, in a cost-saving measure, we have made the business decision to pass on the credit card fees to the customers. However, it seems most of the customers here are okay with this decision. You can kayak from Washburn to where I'm at in Sanger. The park staff will pick you up when you're done. Burgum joined the former president in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago, warming up supporters, and just last Friday, he did the same thing in Minnesota. The crowd here has been really energetic over the past few minutes as the results came in showing Congressman Armstrong again winning this primary gubernatorial election over his opponent, Tammy Miller. I'm actually joined right now by Congressman Armstrong. Congressman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Park management says these blockhouses are what makes Fort Abraham Lincoln stick out from the others.
Well, you've been covering Burgum a lot recently. Now, what did you notice about him at the conference today?
This was a different Doug Burgum, I think. When I usually cover him as governor, he usually sticks to the main points that he's speaking about. Alan, Burgum told me that he and Mr. Trump have had a strong working relationship since he was president. Although Governor Burgum supports the former president now, while he was still running, Burgum was asked this question.
Would you ever do business with Donald Trump?
I don't think so.
Why?
I just think that it's important that you're judged by the company you keep, and
You just wouldn't do business with him?
No, I wouldn't.
I showed this clip to the governor for his reaction. Governor, you say right there that you wouldn't do business with the former president. However, aren't you in fact doing business with him as you're endorsing his campaign, so giving him money, and have been working with him as a surrogate on the trail?
No, I think those are very different things. You're deep into that interview, and there's another gotcha question. And in my mind, when I was sitting in Fargo thinking about that, I was kind of going, hey, I've spent most of my life in software, and he's a New York real estate developer, and he didn't ask me. If he'd asked me, will you support the eventual nominee, I would have said yes.
Former President Trump continues to be the presumed frontrunner for the Republican Party. However, he is still facing legal issues and making comments that have some voters worried. Some say he caused an insurrection. He is charged with 91 criminal counts and says he will be a dictator on day one.
Everybody has different names and labels for what transpired after the election, but certainly there is no, that is not being called an insurrection. In terms of the 91 counts, again, this is a number that's now etched in everyone's mind.
I'm curious, what's in all of this for you if former President Trump should win again? What have the real conversations been? Senator Cramer told me last week that you are, in fact, on a short list for a high-up position in the administration if he should get in again.
Well, I think that's all interesting and all speculative. My support of President Trump is completely unconnected with anything. First of all, he's got to win in November, and it's going to be a very tight competitive race. And the one thing I can control is, the decision. I could have run again, made a decision not to, so I'm in control of that. And the one thing that if I know that is certain for me is there's going to be opportunities in the private sector.
Governor Burgum made the decision over a month ago not to run for a third term. In the final part of my interview, we will discuss what he is focused on in these final months and his reaction to the governor's race in the state.
Justin Gick joins us from their front lawn. Justin?
Alan, it's a little too hot to pass for Christmas time, but you might have to double check your calendar if you drive past the Backman's house in Bismarck. At the corner of East Indiana and South 11th Streets may not be the North Pole, but if you look down the street, you might think you're seeing Santa's workshop. This is the first year the homeowner, Robin Backman, has set up a Christmas in July display. The idea came from our long winters.
We had too much snow, and I couldn't put my inflatables up. So I just decided to do Christmas in July, where there is no snow, only just a little bit of rain. Something different. And I like to be different and enjoy things. And if you can't enjoy it one time, enjoy it another time.
Robin has everything from snowmen to Santas, and she didn't forget Clark W. Griswold or Buddy the Elf either. She does most of the work herself, but her family pitched in too. There are about 42 of these inflatables on the lawn. Robin likes them all. Even the neighbors are a fan of this concept.
I think it's pretty cool. You know, at least someone enjoys it. People come by here every night taking pictures. They even stop, and it's just wonderful.
Because it looks really cool.
Unfortunately, the display can't stay on 24/7, but it only takes the flip of the switch to bring the inflatables back to life. As long as Robin can spread some early Christmas cheer to others, she is satisfied.
I hope they smile and enjoy themselves. That's all that matters to me, is to smile and enjoy it.
Clark Griswold said in Christmas Vacation, "We're gonna have the happiest Christmas." Robin has a similar message.
Happy Christmas in July, from our house to yours.
Monica Hill talked about what he did after he heard the first shot fired and what transpired throughout the rest of that day. Hill turned toward the noise and then back to the limo where he saw Kennedy react.
And I jumped when I realized that he had doing this, and he must have been hit. There must have been a gunshot. So I jumped from my position and started to run to the presidential vehicle to get up on top to form a barrier there to protect both President and Mrs. Kennedy.
As Hill ran to the limousine, he heard another shot and debris flew toward him and Mrs. Kennedy.
And she starts to get up on the back of the car. Well, I'm trying to get up on the back from the rear. And I finally do, and I get a hold of her and put her back in the seat. And when I did that, the president fell to his left into her lap. I realized it appeared to me that he was dead for sure.
Hill turned to the follow-up car and gave the other agents a thumbs down and yelled at the limo driver to get them to Parkland Hospital. The whole ride over, Hill created a barrier over top the president and Mrs. Kennedy. He says the whole car was quiet on the way over, except for the times when he heard Mrs. Kennedy speak to her husband.
Mrs. Kennedy had said, oh, Jack, what have they done? I loved you, Jack. That's as much as I heard her say.
When they arrived at Parkland, Hill and others expected there to be gurneys awaiting their arrival. However, there wasn't, and agents had to go in and retrieve them. The next thing they had to accomplish was getting Texas Governor John Connally out of the limo and inside. Finally, they were able to get to the president.
Mrs. Kennedy had a hold of him. She wouldn't let it go. So I pleaded with her. I said, please, Mrs. Kennedy, let us help the president. No reaction whatsoever.
Hill says doctors did their best to save the president, but he was declared dead at 1 p.m. Central Time, just a half hour after the shots were fired. Hill says the ride back to Air Force One was silent. When they arrived back at Love Field, the president's casket was then unloaded.
We, the agents, carried the casket up the steps to Air Force One, the rear door, to put it in that section of the aircraft.
Mrs. Kennedy followed behind and sat right beside it. Before they could take off, Hill says they waited for a federal judge to arrive and swear in President Lyndon Johnson. Once they arrived in Washington, Hill says Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy came on board to accompany Mrs. Kennedy off the plane.
People at Andrews were smart enough to put a hydraulic lift there to allow us to move the casket down instead of carrying it down a ramp or stairway. And that worked out very well.
Hill says after the casket was placed in the ambulance, they continued to Bethesda Naval Hospital for the president's autopsy. He says it was a late night and they didn't get back to the White House until a little after 4 a.m., where an honor guard met them and accompanied them inside. The casket was placed in the East Room at the White House, and Hill was finally able to go home for a short time, but a sense of guilt continued to hang over him.
I was starting to feel guilt that I hadn't been able to do more than I did. That's what was really starting to bother me. And over the years, it just grew and grew and grew.
60 years later, Hill still feels that guilt, and the events from that day still haunt him. He has only recently been able to speak about what happened. With the 60th anniversary, Hill says the only new things that have emerged are more conspiracy theories and people coming forward with information that he is skeptical about.
Reading the statements of people who were in the know, nurses, doctors, people from the hospital. If you read all of it, you're going to find out, you'll get a true story.
Hill says 60 years later, the assassination of President Kennedy still teaches us the same thing, which is you never know what is around the next corner, and that you may think you have everything covered, but they didn't that day.
You really must be as cautious as possible and take every thing you can do to protect a person in that position, the president. You don't want to go through another one of those.
Hill continues to share his story and recently released his 60th anniversary reprint of his book 5 Days in November with a new afterword. A documentary on his life will be coming out in 2024 called Agent Number 9, The Clint Hill Story. Many see Clint Hill as a hero that day for his actions, but he says he does not feel like one. When I asked how he would like to be remembered one day, he simply said that he tried.